Resuming on page 10. Many negative feedback mechanisms have three components: a receptor, which monitors the value of a variable; a control center, which receives information about the variable from the receptor, establishes the set point, and controls the effector or the effector; and an effector, which produces responses that change the value of the variable. Several negative feedback mechanisms regulate blood pressure, and they are described more fully in chapters 20 and 21. One negative feedback mechanism regulating blood pressure is described here. Receptors that monitor blood pressure are located within large blood vessels near the heart and head. A control center located in the brain receives signals sent through nerves from the receptors. The control center evaluates the information and sends signals through nerves to the heart. The heart is the effector, and the heart rate increases or decreases in response to signals from the brain. Reading a case study. Orthostatic hypotension. Molly is a 75-year-old widow who lives alone. For 2 days, she had a fever and chills and stayed mostly in bed. On rising to go to the bathroom, she felt dizzy, fainted, and fell to the floor. Molly quickly regained consciousness and managed to call her son, who took her to the emergency room, where a diagnosis of orthostatic hypotension was made. Orthostasis literally means to stand, and hypotension refers to low blood pressure. Orthostatic hypotension is a significant drop in blood pressure on standing. When a person changes position from lying down to standing, blood pools within the veins below the heart because of gravity, and less blood returns to the heart. Consequently, blood pressure decreases because the heart has less blood to pump. Predict 2. Although orthostatic hypotension has many causes, in the elderly it can be due to age-related decreased neural and cardiovascular responses. Dehydration can result from a decreased fluid intake while feeling ill and from sweating as a result of a fever. Dehydration can decrease blood volume and lower blood pressure, increasing the likelihood of orthostatic hypotension. Use figure 1. Sorry, I'm going to cut that part out because it's referring to an image in the book, but I'm not going to post it for copyright. So that's the end of the case study. Back to the main text. If blood pressure increases slightly, the receptors detect the increased blood pressure and send that information to the control center in the brain. The control center causes heart rate to decrease, resulting in a decrease in blood pressure. If blood pressure decreases slightly, the receptors inform the control center, which increases heart rate, thereby producing an increase in blood pressure. As a result, blood pressure constantly rises and falls within a normal range of values. Although homeostasis is the maintenance of a normal range of values, this does not mean that all variables are maintained within the same narrow range of values at all times. Sometimes a deviation from the usual range of values can be beneficial. For example, during exercise, the normal range for blood pressure differs from the range under resting conditions, and the blood pressure is significantly elevated. Muscle cells require increased oxygen and nutrients and increased removal of waste products to supply their increased level of activity during exercise. Increased blood pressure increases blood delivery to muscles, which maintains muscle cell homeostasis. during exercise by increasing the delivery of oxygen and nutrients and the removal of waste products. New section, positive feedback. Positive feedback responses are not homeostatic and are rare in healthy individuals. Positive implies that when a deviation from a normal value occurs, the system's response is to make the deviation even greater. Positive feedback, therefore, usually creates a cycle that leads away from homeostasis, and in some cases, results in death. A cardiac, in parentheses, heart, in parentheses, muscle, receiving an inadequate amount of blood is an example of positive feedback. Contraction of cardiac muscle generates blood pressure and moves blood through blood vessels to tissues. A system of blood vessels on the outside of the heart provides cardiac muscle with a blood supply efficient to allow normal contractions to occur. In effect, the heart pumps blood to itself. Just as with other tissues, blood pressure must be maintained to ensure adequate delivery of blood to cardiac muscles. Following extreme blood loss, blood pressure decreases to the point that delivery of blood to cardiac muscle is inadequate. As a result, cardiac muscle homeostasis is disrupted, and the cardiac muscle does not function normally. The heart pumps less blood, which causes the blood pressure to drop even further. This additional decrease in blood pressure means that even less blood is delivered to cardiac muscle, and the heart pumps even less blood, which again decreases blood pressure. If the process continues until the blood pressure is too low to sustain the cardiac muscle, the heart stops beating and death results. I'm going to describe a diagram and read the text that goes along with it, but I will not insert it due to copyright. So, on the left-hand side there is 5 sections of text, and to the right of it there is a diagram of a human brain with the brain stem, and then to the right of the brain and the brain stem is the heart. So reading 1. Receptors monitor the value of a variable. In this case, receptors in the wall of a blood vessel monitor blood pressure. 2. Information about the value of the variable is sent to a control center. In this case, information is sent by the nerves to the part of the brain responsible for regulating blood pressure. 3. The control center compares the value of the variable against the set point. 4. If a response is necessary to maintain homeostasis, the control center causes an effector to respond. In this case, information is sent by the nerves to the heart. An effector produces a response that maintains homeostasis. In this case, changing heart rate changes blood pressure. This diagram and the text I just read are on page 11. So I'm on page 11 now. So continuing the main text. Following a moderate amount of blood loss, example, after a person donates a pint of blood, negative feedback mechanisms produce an increase in heart rate and other responses that restore blood pressure. If blood loss is severe, however, negative feedback mechanisms may not be able to maintain homeostasis, and the positive feedback effect of an ever-decreasing blood pressure can develop. Circumstances in which negative feedback mechanisms are not adequate to maintain homeostasis illustrate a basic principle. Many disease states result from failure of negative feedback mechanisms to maintain homeostasis. medical therapy seeks to, end of page 11, beginning page 12, overcome illness by aiding negative feedback mechanisms. Example, a transfusion reverses a constantly decreasing blood pressure and restores homeostasis. I'm returning to page 11, and there's a diagram and a text, but I'll read the text. It says, receptors in blood vessels monitor blood pressure. The control center in the brain responds to an increase in blood pressure. Then from there you have an arrow pointing to another section of text which says, heart rate decreases, resulting in a decrease in blood pressure. And then from there is a wave. There's a diagram of a wave. On the right hand side it's blood pressure. And then on the bottom there's another portion of text which says, receptors in blood vessels monitor blood pressure. The control center in the brain responds to a decrease in blood pressure. And from there, heart rate increases, resulting in an increase in blood pressure. So I will return to page 12 to continue the main text. A few positive feedback mechanisms do operate in the body under normal conditions, but in all cases they are eventually limited in some way. Birth is an example of a normally occurring positive feedback mechanism. Near the end of pregnancy, the baby's larger size stretches the uterus. This stretching, especially around the opening of the uterus, stimulates contractions of the uterine muscles. The uterine contractions push the baby against the opening of the uterus and stretch it further. This stimulates additional contractions, which result in additional stretching. This positive feedback sequence ends only when the baby is delivered from the uterus and the stretching stimulus is eliminated. Terminology and the body plan. You will be learning many new words as you study anatomy and physiology. Knowing the derivation or etymology of these words can make learning them easy and fun. Most words are derived from Latin or Greek, which are very descriptive languages. For example, foramen is a Latin word for hole, and magnum means large. The foramen magnum is therefore a large hole in the skull through which the spinal cord attaches to the brain. Prefixes and suffixes can be added to words to expand their meaning. The suffix itis means an inflammation, so appendicitis is an inflammation of the appendix. As new terms are introduced in this book, their meanings are often explained. The glossary and the list of word roots, prefixes, and suffixes on the inside back cover of the book provide additional information about the new terms. It is very important to learn these new words so that when you speak to colleagues or write reports, your message is clear and correct. End of page 12, beginning page 13. Body positions. The anatomical position refers to a body standing erect with the face directed toward the upper limbs, hanging to the sides, and palms of the face facing forward. A person is supine when lying face upward and prone when lying face downward. The position of the body can affect the description of body parts relative to each other. In the anatomical position, the elbow is above the hand, but in the supine or prone position, The elbow and hand are at the same level. To avoid confusion, relational descriptions are always based on the anatomical position, no matter the actual position of the body. Thus, the elbow is always described as being above the wrist, whether the person is lying down or is even upside down. Directional terms. Directional terms describe parts of the body relative to each other. It is important to become familiar with these directional terms as soon as possible because you will see them repeatedly throughout the book. Right and left are retained as directional terms in anatomical terminology. Up is replaced by superior, down by inferior, front by anterior, and back by posterior. In humans, superior is synonymous with cephalic, which means toward the head, because when we are in the anatomical position, the head is the highest point. In humans, the term inferior is synonymous with caudal, which means toward the tail, which would be located at the end of the vertebral column if humans had tails. The terms cephalic and caudal can be used to describe directional movements on the trunk, but they are not used to describe directional movements on the limbs. The word anterior means that which goes before, and ventral means belly. The anterior surface of the human body is therefore the ventral surface, or belly, because the belly, quote, goes first, end quote, when we are walking. The posterior means that which follows, and dorsal means back. The posterior surface of the body is the dorsal surface, or back, which follows as we are walking. Predict 5. The anatomical position of a cat refers to the animal standing erect on all four limbs and facing forward. End of page 13. Beginning page 14. So there is a table 1.1, and I will describe it. It says directional terms for humans. So I'm going to read it left to right. So for the term, you have right. Definition, toward the right side of the body. Example, the right ear. You have the term left. Definition, toward the left side of the body. Example, the left eye. The term is superior. Etymology, letter L, and then higher. Definition, a structure above another. Example, the chin is superior to the navel. Next term is inferior. Etymology is lower. Definition, a structure below another. Example, the navel is inferior to the chin. Next term, cephalic. Etymology, kephal, head. Definition, closer to the head than another structure, usually synonymous with superior. Example, the chin is cephalic to the navel, or navel. Next term, caudal. Etymology, cauda, a tail. Definition, closer to the tail than another structure, usually synonymous with inferior. Example, the navel is caudal to the chin. Next term, anterior. Etymology, before. Definition, the front of the body. Example, the navel is anterior to the spine. Next term, posterior. Etymology, posterus, following. Definition, the back of the body. Example, the spine is posterior to the breastbone. Next term, ventral. Etymology, venter, V-E-N-T-R, or belly. Definition: toward the belly, synonymous with anterior. Example: the navel is ventral to the spine. Next term: dorsal. Etymology: dorsum, or back. Definition: toward the back, synonymous with posterior. Example: the spine is dorsal to the breastbone. Next term: proximal. Etymology: proximus, nearest. Definition: closer to the point of attachment to the body than another structure. Example: the elbow is proximal to the wrist. Next term: distal. Etymology: D or DI plus sto, S-T-O, to stand apart or be distant. Definition: farther from the point of attachment to the body than another structure. Example: the wrist is distal to the elbow. Next term: lateral. Etymology: latus, side. Definition: away from the midline of the body. Example: the nipple is lateral to the breastbone. Next term: medial. Etymology: medialis, middle. Definitions or definition: toward the midline of the body. Example: the bridge of the nose is medial to the eye. Next term: superficial. Etymology: superficialis, toward the surface. Definition: toward or on the surface. Example: the skin is superficial to muscle. Next term: deep. Etymology: diop, or D-E-O-P, deep. Definition: away from the surface, internal. Example: the lungs are deep to the ribs. Resuming the main text. Proximal means nearest, whereas distal means distant. These terms are used to refer to linear structures, such as the limbs, in which one end is near another structure and the other end is farther away. Each limb is attached at its proximal end to the body, and the distal end, such as the hand, is farther away. Medial means toward the midline, and lateral means away from the midline. The nose is located in a medial position in the face, and the eyes are lateral to the nose. The term superficial refers to a structure close to the surface of the body, and deep is toward the interior of the body. The skin is superficial to muscle and bone. Body parts and regions. A number of terms are used when referring to different parts or regions of the body. The upper limb is divided into the arm, forearm, wrist, and hand. The arm extends from the shoulder to the wrist, the arm extends from the shoulder to the elbow, and the forearm extends from the elbow to the wrist. The lower limb is divided into the thigh, leg, ankle, and foot. The thigh extends from the hip to the knees, and the leg extends from the knee to the ankle. Note that, contrary to popular usage, the terms arm and leg refer to only a part of the respective limb. The central region of the body consists of the head, neck, and trunk. The trunk can be divided into the thorax, chest, abdomen, region between the thorax and the pelvis, and pelvis, the inferior end of the trunk associated with the hips. The abdomen is often subdivided superficially into quadrants by two imaginary lines, one horizontal and one vertical, which intersect at the navel. The quadrants formed are the right upper, right lower, and left lower quadrants. In addition to these quadrants, the abdomen is sometimes subdivided into 9 regions by 4 imaginary lines, 2 horizontal and 2 vertical. These 4 lines create an imaginary tic-tac-toe figure on the abdomen, resulting in 9 regions. Epigastric, right and left, hypochondriac, umbilical, right and left lumbar, hypogastric, and right and left iliac. Clinicians use the quadrants and regions as reference points for locating underlying organs. For example, the appendix is located in the right lower quadrant, and the pain of an acute appendicitis is usually felt there. End of page 14, beginning page 15. Frontal, forehead. Orbital, eye. Nasal, nose. Otic, ear. Buccal, cheek. Mental, chin. Cervical, neck. Pectoral, chest. Clavicular, collarbone. Axillary, armpit. Sternal, breastbone. Brachial, arm. Mammary, breast. Brachial, arm. Abdominal, abdomen. Antecubital, front of elbow. Antebrachial, forearm. Umbilical, navel. Pelvic, pelvis. Carpal, wrist. Inguinal, groin. Palmar, palm. Digital, fingers. Manual, hand. Pubic, genital. Femoral, thigh. Coxal, hip. Patellar, kneecap. Crural, leg. Pedal, foot. Talus, ankle. Dorsum, top of foot. Digital, toes. Cranial, skull. Cervical, neck. Occipital, base of skull. Nuchal, back of neck. Acromial, point of shoulder. Scapular, shoulder blade. Dorsal, back. Vertebrae, spinal column. Olecranon, point of elbow. Lumbar, loin. Sacral, between hips. Dorsum, back of hand. Gluteal or gluteal, buttocks. Perennial, perineum. Popliteal, hollow behind knee. Sural, calf. Plantar, sole. Calcaneal, heel. Planes. At times, it is conceptually useful to describe the body as having imaginary flat surfaces called planes passing through it. A plane divides or sections the body, making it possible to, quote, look inside, end quote, and observe the body's structures. A sagittal plane runs vertically through the body, separating it into right and left portions. The word sagittal literally means, quote, the flight of an arrow, end quote, and refers to the way the body would be split by an arrow passing through anteriorly to posteriorly. A medial plane is a sagittal plane that passes through the midline of the body, dividing it into equal right and left halves. A transverse or horizontal plane runs parallel to the ground, dividing the body into superior and inferior portions. A frontal or coronal plane runs vertically from right to left and divides the body into anterior and posterior parts. Organs are often sectioned to reveal their internal structure. A cut through the long axis of the organ is a longitudinal section, and a cut at right angles to the long axis is a cross or transverse section. If a cut is made across the long axis at other than a right angle, it is called an oblique section. End of page 15, beginning page 16. Body cavities. The body contains many cavities. Some of these, such as the nasal cavity, open to the outside of the body, and some do not. The trunk contains 3 large cavities that do not open to the outside of the body: the thorax, the abdominal, and the pelvic. The rib cage surrounds the thoracic cavity, and the muscular diaphragm separates it from the abdominal cavity. The thoracic cavity is divided into right and left parts by a median partition called the mediastinum. The mediastinum contains the heart, the thymus, the trachea, the esophagus, and other structures, such as blood vessels and nerves. The 2 lungs are located on each side of the mediastinum. Abdominal muscles primarily enclose the abdominal cavity, which contains the stomach, intestines, liver, spleen, pancreas, and kidneys. Pelvic bones encase the small space known as the pelvic cavity, where the urinary bladder, part of the large intestine, and the internal reproductive organs are housed. The abdominal and pelvic cavities are not physically separated and sometimes are called the abdominopelvic cavity. Serous membranes. Serous membranes cover the organs of the trunk cavities and line the trunk cavities. Imagine an inflated balloon into which a fist has been pushed. The fist represents an organ. The inner balloon wall in contact with the fist represents the visceral serous membrane covering the organ, and the outer part of the balloon wall represents the parietal serous membrane. The cavity or space between the visceral and parietal serous membranes is normally filled with a thin lubricating film of serous fluid produced by the membranes. As organs rub against the body wall or against another organ, the combination of serous fluid and smooth serous membranes reduces friction. The thoracic cavity contains 3 serous membrane lined cavities: a pericardial cavity and 2 pleural cavities. The pericardial cavity surrounds the heart. The visceral pericardium covers the heart, which is contained within a connective tissue sac lined with the parietal pericardium. The pericardial cavity, which contains pericardial fluid, is located between the visceral pericardium and the parietal pericardium. A pleural cavity surrounds each lung, which is covered by visceral pleura. Parietal pleural line, the inner surface of the thoracic wall. The lateral surfaces of the mediastinum and the superior surface of the diaphragm. The pleural cavity lies between the visceral pleura and the parietal pleura and contains pleural fluid. The abdominopelvic cavity contains a serous membrane-lined cavity called the peritoneal cavity. Visceral peritoneum covers many of the organs of the abdominopelvic cavity. Parietal peritoneum lines the wall of the abdominopelvic cavity and the inferior surface of the diaphragm. The peritoneal cavity is located between the visceral peritoneum and the parietal peritoneum and contains peritoneal fluid. That is the end of page 16, and most of page 17 contains diagrams or pictures which I can't show due to copyright, so I will skip page 17. Beginning page 18. Inflammation of serous membranes. The serous membranes can become inflamed, usually as a result of an infection. Pericarditis is inflammation of the pericardium. Pleurisy is inflammation of the pleura or pleura, and peritonitis is inflammation of the peritoneum. Mesenteries, which consist of two layers of peritoneum fused together, connect the visceral peritoneum of some abdominopelvic organs to the parietal peritoneum on the body wall, or to the visceral peritoneum of the other abdominopelvic organs. The mesenteries anchor the organs to the body wall and provide a pathway for nerves and blood vessels to reach the organs. Other abdominopelvic organs are more closely attached to the body wall and do not have mesenteries. Parietal peritoneum covers these other organs, which are said to be retroperitoneal, which means behind the peritoneum. The retroperitoneal organs include the kidneys, adrenal glands, the pancreas, parts of the intestines, and the urinary bladder. There is a diagram which I will describe. The mediastinum divides the thoracic cavity, and it includes the esophagus, the trachea, blood vessels, thymus, and heart. And then below it is the abdominopelvic cavity, which includes the abdominal cavity and the pelvic cavity. And in between the abdominopelvic cavity and the mediastinum is the diaphragm. That's the end of page 18. Page 19 has more diagrams. I'm gonna skip those diagrams and go to page 20. Summary. A functional knowledge of anatomy and physiology can be useful to solve problems concerning the body when healthy or diseased. Anatomy and Physiology, page 2. 1. Anatomy is the study of the body's structures. Developmental anatomy considers anatomical changes from conception to adulthood. Embryology focuses on the first 8 weeks of development. Cytology examines cells, and histology examines tissues. Gross anatomy emphasizes organs from a systematic or regional perspective. 2. Surface anatomy uses superficial structures to locate deeper structural and anatomical imaging. Is a non-invasive technique for identifying deep structures. 3. Physiology is the study of the body's functions. It can be approached from a cellular or systems point of view. 4. Pathology deals with all aspects of disease. Exercise physiology examines changes caused by exercise. Structural and functional organization, page 2. 1. Basic chemical characteristics are responsible for the structure and functions of life. 2. Cells are the basic structural and functional units of organisms, such as plants and animals. Organelles are small structures within cells that perform specific functions. 3. Tissues are groups of cells of similar structure and function and the material surrounding them. The 4 primary tissue types are epithelial, connective, muscle, and nervous tissues. 4. Organs are structures composed of 2 or more tissues that perform specific functions. 5. Organs are arranged into 11 organ systems of the human body. 6. Organ systems interact to form a whole functioning organism. Characteristics of life, page 6. Humans have many characteristics, such as organization, metabolism, responsiveness, growth, development, and reproduction, in common with other organisms. Biomedical research, page 9. Much of what is known about humans is derived from research on other organisms. Homeostasis, page 9. Homeostasis is the condition in which body functions, body fluids, and other factors of internal environment are maintained at levels suitable to support life. Negative feedback. 1. Negative feedback mechanisms operate to maintain homeostasis. 2. Many negative feedback mechanisms consist of a receptor, control center, and effector. Positive feedback. 1. Positive feedback mechanisms usually increase deviations from normal. 2. Although a few positive feedback mechanisms normally exist in the body, most positive feedback mechanisms are harmful. Terminology and the body plan, page 12. Body positions. 1. A human standing erect with the face directed forward, the arms hanging to the side, and the palms facing forward is in the anatomical position. 2. A person lying face upward is supine. A person lying face downward is prone. Directional terms. Directional terms always refer to the anatomical position, no matter what the actual position of the body. Body parts and regions. 1. The body can be divided into the limbs, upper and lower, and a central region consisting of the head, neck, and trunk regions. 2. Superficially, the abdomen can be divided into quadrants, or 9 regions. These divisions are useful for locating internal organs or describing the location of a pain or tumor. Planes. 1. Planes of the body. A sagittal plane divides the body into right and left parts. A median plane divides the body into equal right and left halves. A transverse horizontal plane divides the body into superior and inferior portions. A frontal or coronal plane divides the body into anterior and posterior parts. 2. Sections of an organ. A longitudinal section of an organ divides it along the long axis. A cross or transverse section cuts at a right angle to the long axis of an organ. An oblique section cuts across the long axis of an organ at an angle other than a right angle. Body cavities. 1. The mediastinum subdivides the thoracic cavity. 2. The diaphragm separates the thoracic and abdominal cavities. 3. The pelvic bones surround the pelvic cavity. Serous membranes. 1. Serous membranes line the trunk cavities. The parietal portion of a serous membrane lines the wall of the cavity, and the visceral portion is in contact with internal organs. The serous membranes secrete fluid, which fills the space between the visceral and parietal membranes. The serous membrane protects organs from friction. The pericardial cavity surrounds the heart. The pleural cavities surround the lungs, and the peritoneal cavity surrounds certain abdominal and pelvic organs. 2. Mesenteries are parts of the peritoneum that hold the abdominal organs in place and provide a passageway for blood vessels and nerves to the organs. 3. Retroperitoneal organs are located, quote, behind, end quote, the parietal peritoneum. End of page 20. Beginning page 21. Review and comprehension. 1. Physiology. Never mind, that's a brief test. And page 22 are more test questions. And after that, it just goes on to chapter 2. So I will leave it here for this recording.